Hello, my lovelies. I'm Ginny O, the author with no last name, and it is Booktober, my favorite time of the year, the time to get out all our spooky decorations. George over here is having a great time guarding the pumpkin patch, but it's Booktober and we're going to talk about books all October. Booktober is brought to you by the local library, a great place to check out books without having to pay for them. Save money, read books, win-win, support your local library. They need you to come and take out books to get their tax dollars. All right, so I actually don't have really books to show you because, like I said, I've been using my local library and it's a 30 library system. So there's a lot of the books that I get from other libraries and they ship them to my library. I read them and they ship them back. So I have this great little sheaf of papers here of notes that I've taken of all the books I've read this year. And I've read about 60 books, I think, and we've got 31 that I've finished since the last Booktober. And that means hopefully we're going to go through about 6 books of video. I have them sorted out into middle grade, then young adult fantasy, young adult science fiction, adult fantasy, and adult science fiction. So today we should hopefully get through middle grade and start young adult fantasy. So much fun. Okay, before you ask, what are you doing in the middle grade section, Ginny? I have a cousin, and he's about 10 or 11, and Mother was like, do you have any books you can recommend for him? I'm like, Mother, I haven't been in middle grade in a while, but let me go look. So that's what I was doing in middle grade. So I walked into my local library, and middle grade is right there, right next to the door, which is great because you can see the Warrior Cats, the Diary of the Wimpy Kid, the Harry Potters, the Wings of Fire. And today we're going to go over a book series that is by the Wings of Fire author Twee Sutherland and her sister Kate Sutherland. Now, by the way, Kate Sutherland is a literary agent, but she and her sister wrote a book trilogy together, and it is called The Menagerie. And The Menagerie, I call it a 3-book series, but the first 2 books ends on cliffhangers. So as a caveat, if you want to take out the Menagerie series, and you're listening to me talk about it and you think you like the concept or whatever, you think would be great for, I don't know, a nephew or something, get all 3 books at once. Save yourself some time and trouble and get all 3 books at once. So Twee T. Sutherland and her sister, Carrie Sutherland. And I call it Harry Potter, but at a zoo. So, Logan has just moved to a new town in Xanadu, Wyoming. His mother is either missing or dead, and his father has taken a new job, and he's trying to go into a new school and all that, and he's really good with the animals, and one morning he wakes up and he finds a griffin under his bed. Turns out that Xanadu is the home of the Menagerie, or at least one of the menageries, a magical zoo. So he runs into Zoe, whose family runs the zoo, and she works at the zoo, and they have to work together to get the griffins back to the zoo before the inspectors find out that the griffins got out. And how did they get out? What is going on? What, all these problems. And then, oh no, somebody ate the goose that lays the golden eggs, and we think it's one of the dragons, so the dragon has to go on trial, and that takes the 2nd book. And then the 3rd book is more about, what's going on with the water section, the aquarium section of the zoo, what's going on with his mother, what's going on with all the inspectors, all this type of history of the zoo. And anyway, it really kind of felt very Harry Potter meets the zoo thing. And if you have a child who likes Harry Potter, then this would probably be a really good book for them to try. Now, I read them. I recommended them to my mother, and my mother went, and she read them all, and she went, I don't understand why there can't be more books. And I said to her, I don't know either. So when you are picking up a book like this, and the first thing you think when you finish it and you know it's the last book in the series, that you're like, oh my god, I want more in this world, that's generally a sign of a really good book. So to me, okay, these books got a 5 Ginger Snap rating. And the reason why I really liked it was everything that Twee and Carrie set up in the first books. You know, you had these really likable characters, you had these characters that had very realistic conflicts with friends at school, with their parents, things that are going on in their lives type of thing. And then, you know, you had what was going on at the zoo and, you know, things that this kid was learning about himself. Everything they set up paid off in the end. You know, it really didn't make sense who the villains turned out to be, what was going on with the Xanadu Wild West theme park there that they had, and even like this one little creature that it appears that only he could see, even that became important in the end. And to me, that's a sign of, you know, really well thought out and really well planned writing. And I mean, I really did like Logan. You know, he actually had personality. Zoe had personality too. They were really fun characters, and like, you know, they were really believable. You know, they were trying to sneak into a party or sneak out of a party, and, you know, they were trying to, you had to find the Griffins all over town, so you got to, in an organic way, find out more about Xanadu as a town versus, you know, you walk through town and you just describing the town. No, you had to go find these animals, and the animals are like at the post office or at the library and stuff, so you learn more about the town that way, which was really cool. And even like the whole storyline with the mer people paid off in the end. And yes, we do find out what happens to his mother, but I'm not going to spoil it for you. I really don't want to spoil the whole thing of the books. So if you liked Harry Potter, I know it says Fable Haven in Spiderwick Chronicles on Goodreads, but if you really liked Harry Potter, and you really wanted more of that type of magical adventure, I recommend the Menagerie. 5 Ginger Snaps, just very enjoyable, short reads, but they leave off on cliffhangers, so once again, if you're going to get them, get all 3 at once, and just, like, plow through them. It won't take long, I promise. They're just really fun, and sometimes when you're reading a book, all you want it to be is really fun, okay? So, 5 Ginger Snaps, wholeheartedly recommend. Great little middle grade stuff, you know. If I could play a middle grade that well, I'd be so happy. So the next book we're going to talk about, I thought was young adult, but Goodreads says it was up for a middle grade award, so we're going to keep it here under middle grade, and it's The School of Good and Evil by Soman Chinani, or Chinani. And yes, there is a Netflix movie for this. If you want to watch the Netflix movie instead of reading the book, that's perfectly acceptable. So in the book, there are 2 friends, Sophie and Agatha, and Sophie really wants to go to the School of Good and Evil, whereas Agatha doesn't. So the time comes where the girls and boys will be kidnapped from the village, and all the villagers are trying to keep their children safe while Sophie is like leaving the window open. And Agatha decides to try to save Sophie and gets caught up in it. And they end up at the School of Good and Evil, except Sophie, who thinks she's a beautiful princess, ends up at the School for Evil, and Agatha, who thinks she's an evil witch, ends up at the School for Good. And the whole story is finding out, why does the School of Good and Evil exist? What's going on? Is Sophie really a good princess, or is she actually an evil witch? Is Agatha really an evil witch, or really a good princess? And, so on and so forth about that. Now, I'm going to give this a 3 ginger snaps rating. Mostly because by the end of the book, it really felt like subversion for subversion's sake. When I went and I checked this guy's Wikipedia, which I know is kind of cheap, but Mr. Chinini said in his Wikipedia, in one of these articles, that when he was a kid, all he had was Disney movies, and he wanted to write a book that would, incorporate Disney tropes, but, kind of like subvert and lampshade them. And eventually, if you are someone like me who has lots of Disney movies and has read, Grimm, I have Grimm right here. Grimm's right here, right next to the Arabian Nights, and Bullfinch, and Aesop is a little out of sight. But, in Anderson's, if you've read a lot of these fairy tales and you are paying attention to what's going on with Disney, and you've also read like Mercedes Lackey, she has both the 500 Kingdom Syndromes and the series and the Elemental series, this is going to feel very, it's been done. Now, not to say that it's not good, but story-wise, you're going to feel like these are very common young adult tropes, and he's taking these fairy tales and he's trying to subvert and lampshade them. Except the problem is now Disney is also subverting and lampshading their stuff in the same way. And it's not Tsunami's fault that, Iger and Chapek are doing this with the Disney stuff. That's not his fault. It's just, it really felt like he was doing it just to do it. I'm not entirely sure. There was a lot of plot reason to it, and I'm going to probably get a lot of like real, gee, how could you not like the School of Good and Evil? I did like it. It got a 3. Okay, it's a 3. It's not that bad. It's just, I don't know if I'd go pick up the sequels just because the ending of the first one was like a little, I don't know, type of thing to me. Like, it didn't really feel satisfying. And when something like that doesn't really feel satisfying, I get really worried that the second and third books aren't, and he's got like 6 of them now, are going to continue this trend of subversion for subversion's sake type of thing. And so I gave it 3 ginger snaps. Now I do have a note here that if you like limited third person, don't bother with this book. It's not in limited third, it's omni third, and you would probably consider it head hopping, because there's like not distinct Sophie chapters, and there's not distinct Agatha chapters, and there's not distinct Prince chapters. I can't even remember. Sorry, can't even remember his name. They're not distinct. It's omni third, and yes, it's pretty clear on who's thinking, but it will skip around within chapters, so you're not going to get just Agatha's viewpoint or just Sophie's viewpoint. And if that's what you like, and you like them little delineated chapters like that, don't bother. You're not gonna like it. It's just gonna drive you crazy. Okay? Alright. So 3 ginger snaps, mostly because subversion for subversion's sake. It's not that I didn't like Sophie, and it's not that I didn't like Agatha. It's just I got to the end and it was just like, ooh, no. It's okay. I've read better. So let's move on to young adult fantasy. We got 15 minutes. We're at 15 minutes here, so we might be here for at least another 10, 15. So the first book on my list is called A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking by T. Kingfisher. Now, T. Kingfisher is a pseudonym for a prominent fantasy author, and she uses this pseudonym to write things that she couldn't write under that name. Okay, so in the Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking, it's Mona isn't like other wizards. Her magic deals with making bread, and she has a comfy life working at her aunt's bakery, but all that changes when somebody ends up on the bakery floor dead, murdered. And there's bigger problems afoot than just Mona having a dead body on her floor that she has to prove that she didn't murder, and maybe it will be Mona's magic that can save the entire city from an invasion. Because the city doesn't have any other wizards now but Mona. So I gave this book a 4 out of 5. I really do like it. Like, it was really kind of inventive, the way that she used this magic of, instead of having stone golems or, things like that, it was bread. It was like bread and cookies, and you really don't think about how tough bread can be until you're reading this book and you're reading along and you're going, yep, oh, I remember, I know how that is. Oh, baking. And it felt like kind of like this really weird idea that she had late at night, and she's like, I want to write a book about, a wizard who uses bread to defend the city, and to work through their magic. And the city was pretty well thought out, and like the other magic system was fine, but like the whole thing was very fun. Like, it was fun, it was interesting, it was like something I hadn't really seen before in reading all my fantasy stuff, because a lot of times we get so stuck on like our elemental systems that thinking outside the box is a lot harder than you think it is. So it really felt, I don't know, groundbreaking kind of way. And I would like to see more like it. Like, I'd like to see more, with the bread wizardry, and what does she do? Does she go back to the bakery? Is she called on again or whatever? I liked Mona as a character. Now, the reason why I gave this a 4 out of 5 instead of a 5 out of 5 is there is one section of the book, like one little chapter, that I read the chapter and I went, why is this here? It was a chapter where she wasn't doing anything. She was hiding out, and she was relying on other people to do things for her instead of doing them herself. And I was just kind of confused as to, why are we doing it like that? Why can't she be out there being active and being in charge of her own agency, like being in charge of the story and moving things along? up until that point, and like the chapter ends, and after that point, she is back in charge. She's back, you know, she's making the decisions and stuff. But it really didn't feel in character, and it really didn't service the plot or the book overall that she was there in this tower for a chapter. And this is me being fussy and being an author and going, I would have excised that, because, you know, it was going along, and then we had this dead spot, and then it got going again, and I was just like, that dead spot didn't need to exist, and what was overall a really great book. So I enjoyed it. 4 out of 5. Interesting concept, in generally well executed, really great characters, would revisit the world, win-win. All right. Let's see. The next book that we're going to talk about is The Gilded Ones by Namina Forna. Now, this is one of those Afro-Centro fantasy science fiction trend books, which doesn't mean it's bad, okay? Last year, I read The Children of Blood and Bone, and I was kind of meh about it. And this year I read The Gilded Ones, and let me say, The Gilded Ones is what The Children of Blood and Bone was trying to do, okay? This one is so much better. Like, 4.5, 5 ginger snaps. Okay, so in The Golden Ones, Dika lives in a village where it is imperative to their religion that the girls bleed red. If the girls don't bleed red, as they bleed gold, they will be killed, basically. And because they're impure. And Dika, they go to great lengths to not, you know, cut themselves before that day that they're supposed to go in and be tested and come out as pure, or if they're impure, they're dragged away to die, basically. And Dika gets caught ahead of time, and instead of bleeding red, she bleeds gold. After some off-screen torture, she is offered a choice. She could, you know, stay in the village and try to die, or she could go to the capital and become part of this special force that they're creating of other impure girls to fight these monsters, this war that they're fighting to protect the country. And of course, she agrees to go to the capital, become part of this fighting force, and she learns to fight. There's a love interest, and then there's the twists and the secrets and, oh my god, I've been lied to my entire life type of things. And, you know, okay, I'll be honest. This is a very, very typical young adult plotted book. It's very tropey. If you're reading along and you're like, oh, this is gonna happen, I know who this is, blah, blah, blah. That's it. That's what it is. That's it. And there is nothing wrong with it, okay? It is actually, I find, a very comforting read. I liked it because, you know, to an extent, I like Dika. I can understand that Dika doesn't have this huge, overarching, I have to save all the Gilded Ones gold, you know, goals. Well, she doesn't, because she doesn't know it's wrong towards the end of the book. So that would be a second book thing. Right now, she's trying to survive. You know, you have to find out everything is wrong before you can fix it. And so it was very much one of those, this is the first half of our hero's journey type of thing. Very, but it, you know, very, very tropey. But at the same time, the world building was really good. I liked Dika. I didn't mind the love interests. You know, the whole thing was, you know, very comforting type of thing, and it was very interesting to read, like, especially if you're someone who has a religious background and you've kind of moved a little away from your religious background. So it's very interesting to see how that played out, because they were using the pure and impure as part of the religion, and they were using religion to enforce it, which is a very common thing to do. And so there's some like deconstruction about, is the religion right, or is the old religion correct? And of course, Dika is special. She has like magical powers that are greater than the other girls, and so on and so forth. You know, but that's your pretty standard young adult book at this point. So I'm not gonna ding it for being a standard young adult book. If you want a solid plot and a solid story with these characters that are relatively, likable and decent, and finding out a way to deal with what's going on around them, because, they have to learn stuff as well. They have to train. That's another thing I liked. It did show training montages. It wasn't like these girls were suddenly the most awesome fighters in the world, as they had to train for it, which is sometimes can be forgotten. And I'm liking that I'm seeing more training montages in books and stuff, because it means it makes the endings feel more earned, rather than them, whoa, they're just prodigies, okay? I am gonna say there are some trigger warnings here. When I say torture off screen, it's not 100% off screen. They do talk about it. It can be very uncomfortable in parts. So if you don't like gore, or you have body horror issues, might not be the book for you. Otherwise, I really did like it. I thought it was great. Like, did I say 4.5? I think I said 4.5, 5. Anyway, it was a fun book to read, very comforting, and really, really interesting in the world building. Okay, so today we have gone over these 6 books: the Menagerie trilogy by Twee T. Sutherland and Carrie H. Sutherland, which is Harry Potter but at a zoo, 5 out of 5. The Someone Shinani's The School of Good and Evil, which subversion for subversion's sake, but a fairy tale fantasy, 3 out of 5. A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking by T. Kingfisher, which I gave a 4.5 out of 5. It's, what if you're a magician, your magic worked with bread, and how do you defend your city if all you've got is bread? Type of book. Very interesting concept, fun execution, just one little chapter needed to be cut out. And then lastly, The Gilded Ones by Namina Forna, and a very standard young adult fantasy novel, like a hero's journey, but it's interesting and comforting in a way, and the characters are good, and the world building is good. There's an interesting concept here, so 5 out of 5. Okay, give it a shot. I'm probably not making it sound as good as it is. So those are this week's 6 books. Enjoy your Booktober. I hope if any of those books sound good to you and you're like, I don't know if I want to buy them or not, please remember your local library. And your local library will also have services like Libby if you like them in ebook format. And you should be able to also get audiobooks through your local library. Please patronize your local library. They rely on you having circulation in order to keep their funding. All right? And authors like it when you use the library, because the libraries pay them. Okay? Take care, my lovelies. Bless, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video, where we will go over more books for Booktober.